he had developed this saddha, feeling there was perhaps a way out, and he would try to discover it. So he had saddha. You could say he had saddha in terms of belief in himself, confidence in himself, in his own ability to do this, to do the practice. But he didn't yet know for sure. So he didn't yet have confirmed saddha, which happens at the time of sotapanna, like this quality of pasana, of an unwavering faith, unwavering belief. So that saddha gets us through those difficult times when it might be hot or uncomfortable, and when we might be tired, then it gets us through those difficult periods, and we can still practice no matter what the circumstances. Remember Ajahn Nyaniko teaching us one time that he challenges anybody who is keeping precepts, whether it's the 5 precepts, the 8 precepts, or the 227 precepts of the bhikkhus. He challenges us to try to find any situation where you can't practice. So even if you're not meditating, as long as you're keeping the precepts, you can find ways to practice in whatever situation you find yourself in. So you might, if you're at work, you might not always be able to cultivate mindfulness in the same way that while you're on a meditation retreat, but you will find ways to be kind and to be generous and to develop patient endurance. For example, if we have a difficult boss or a difficult coworker in our workplace, we can develop patient endurance and learn how to find ways to get along with them. A friend who worked in Chevron, and he had one of his bosses was very difficult to get along with. And so he was asking about advice for this. And he said that his boss normally would get very upset for almost no reason and really mistreat people, really speak very harshly with people. And he said it was very hard for him to not get angry and to not react to this. And he would react to his boss, and that was kind of normal. So I said, well, maybe with anger, you can use this particular technique of just before you react. So when your boss is telling you off and being mean to you, take a deep breath and just wait a little bit before reacting. Don't react right away. Just take a deep breath, and you'll find even just one breath is usually enough time to not react. And just that much time is enough to make the situation much better. So he said, okay, I'll try that. So a few months went by, and he visited the monastery again. He said, hey, I tried your advice with my boss, and it worked. And I said, oh, wow, okay. So this is very high up in Chevron, like his boss was the CFO Chevron in Richmond, California. So very, very high up. And it's a very high stakes position. And so I said, wow, okay, well, what happened? He said, well, yeah, she got really upset with me as normal. And then I took a deep breath and I didn't react. And then she said, "Why didn't you react to me? Why are you so peaceful?" And then he said, "Well, that was an opening to say, well, there's this practice I do. It's this Buddhist meditation." And then she asked for a Dhamma book, and he gave her a Dhamma book from a Bayagiri, and said, "Wow, that's amazing." And so then a few more months went by, and I said, "Hey, whatever happened to the CFO? What happened after they read that Dhamma book? What came of that?" He said, "Well, it's really interesting. She actually quit. She actually quit. She quit working at Chevron. It's her whole life, no family. Her whole life was the corporation. And she actually quit." I said, "Wow, that is interesting." So we'll never know why, but it is interesting that somehow got interested in the Dhamma just through someone not reacting. We never know. We never know how our actions, how much they can impact people. The smallest things, something as small as not reacting with anger, can have that big of an impact on the world. Uh, so when the Bodhisattva left home, left the home life, left the palace, and went off to practice, that's another thing we can recollect to help ourselves to bring up energy for the practice. And it said that he's in his 29th year, which I think would mean he was actually 28 when he left home. And not really knowing exactly how to practice, probably knowing something about the practices of the Brahmins and spiritual wanderers at that time, but not being really sure how he was going to practice. So one of the first things that he did was cross the what was the name of the river? The Anoja River, which curiously on maps is still called the Anoja River today. In the suttas, it's called the Anoja River, and on modern maps, that river still has the same name all these years later. And so he crossed that river into the next state. So he was from the state of Kosala, and he crossed into Magadha across this river. And Magadha, the king of Magadha, was a man named King Bimbisara. And so the Bodhisattva started his practice there in Magadha and going alms round in a small village. And one of the first things that happened was people are sort of amazed that there's this tall, very good looking ascetic going alms round, and people are sort of in awe of him. And he receives food. And one of the first things we read about is that he is looking at all of his food. He's never eaten all of his food mixed together in that way in the bowl. It's always been very perfectly arranged on plates in the best way possible in the palace. And so he's eating out of a bowl and everything's mixed together, the food of the villagers. And he's never done this before. And that's when he comes up with this wisely reflecting. He's a patisankha yoniso. So he's wisely reflecting, I use alms food. It would be, this is what's appropriate for me as a samana, as a religious seeker. Wisely reflecting, I use alms food not for fun, not for pleasure, not for fattening, not for beautification, only for the maintenance and nourishment of this body, for keeping it healthy, for helping with the holy life, thinking thus, I will allay hunger without overeating, so I may continue to live blamelessly at ease and continue my practice. So that meal reflection that we do to this day comes from right when he first started to practice, right when he first started to be a monk and go alms round. So not yet awakened, not yet enlightened. So some of the things that we do, they actually come about from when the Bodhisattva was still practicing. Also, the Sakya rules, we have 30 rules around how we eat. And so I mentioned a couple of these earlier before the meal today. Some of you weren't in the room when I mentioned that. And there's rules like eating alms food appreciatively. There's rules like not licking the bowl, not licking one's hands, not eating with a loud smacking noise, not talking when I have food in the mouth. These are all, they're called Sakya, or minor rules of training, minor rules of conduct that we have as bhikkhus. These all come from the palace life. These are how the Bodhisattva was already trained in the palace. They had very strict protocols around eating very beautifully. So even in the palace, so he actually used some of the trainings that he gained as a prince. It wasn't that they were just totally partying all the time with no morals at all. They actually did have some sort of rubby up, some sort of decorum around how they ate. So he carried that over to his samana life, and we have that today. So the way we eat as monks is actually stems back to how it was done by the Khatiyas in the palace in those days. And then he went and practiced up on a mountain nearby. And word traveled quickly about this very strange monk who was very tall and very king-like, very, very amazing. And word got back to King Bimbisara, so he wanted to see this for himself. And so he went with his whole royal entourage and went up to pay respects to the Bodhisattva. So this is at the very beginning of his practice, the first year of his practice. It said he practiced for 6 years before attaining Buddhahood. This is right at the beginning. And King Bimbisara goes up to this mountainside area where I believe it was in a cave where he was practicing. He was not yet practicing the severe austerities, but he was practicing normally, eating normally, and probably doing some sort of wisdom practice at that time, because he didn't even yet have his first 2 meditation teachers. This is before that. And King Bimbisara pays respects. He's very taken by him, and he says, you're wearing robes, but you look like a king, and you're very upright, you're very inspiring. And what is your lineage? What is your clan? And the Bodhisattva says, I'm from Kosala, Gotama by name. The Sakyan are my clan. And I've left the home life to relinquish and seek a happiness that is beyond sensual pleasures. And King Bimbisara, he's even more impressed. And he says, He says, you are more deserving of this kingdom than I am. I offer you the whole kingdom. He offers him the whole kingdom. And this is currently the biggest. At that time, he was the king of the biggest kingdom in India. So I offer you the whole kingdom, hands down. He says, I don't want your kingdom. It would only be a burden for me. I have already left my own kingdom behind, and I seek the deathless. I seek something which is not, which is far more exquisite than a kingdom. And I leave all these things behind like spit in the dust. I'm not interested. So King Bimbisara is even more inspired. And he says, when you attain awakening, please remember me and come teach me. And I want to be one of your first disciples. So after the Bodhisattva becomes the Buddha, becomes awakened, he actually keeps that promise, and he actually goes to King Bimbisara, and he's one of his first disciples. In the first few years, he's not the first disciple, but after the Buddha teaches the 5 bhikkhus at Deer Park, in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, he actually, by stages, makes his way back to Rajagaha, where the palace of King Bimbisara is, and he teaches him, and King Bimbisara becomes a Sotapanna. And at that point, Buddhism is just, and then it becomes established in India. There's about 20,000 bhikkhus at that point. And it's quite an amazing story, and very, very deliberate, very organized how the Buddha spread the teaching, very skillful. And I think it's really amazing that we have this teaching today, that we still have it, and we can actually follow it. So and society was not that much different back then as it is now. And perhaps in some ways it was more civilized than what we have now. You read in the suttas about people buying and selling things, and politics, different politics in the different kingdoms, battles, wars. It's not much different than today. So we think about these things to tell ourselves we're actually a part of something bigger. When we join the Bodhisasana, when we start to do this practice, when we keep precepts, and we actually try to follow the Hontang an Prasert, Arya Makmi Ong Bat, when we try to follow the excellent Noble Eightfold Path and realize the Arya Satsi, the Four Noble Truths, this is actually, we're a part of something very special. And the Buddha talks about, he says in the suttas that people who don't get to the point of Sotapanna, but they keep the precepts and they practice, they will, upon the breakup of the body at the time of death, take rebirth as devas. And whatever level they take rebirth at as deva, they will outshine and have more glory than the other devas in that realm. And also, when people follow the Buddha's teachings, keep precepts, follow the Noble Eightfold Path, if you don't yet attain Sotapan and you get to the reborn as a deva, then while other devas who were not part of the Bodhisasana before, other devas at the end of their deva life, they will fall to the hell realms, ghost realms, and animal realms. But the devas who were part of the Bodhisasana before will tend to go back to the human realm so they can continue to practice. So that's in the suttas. I don't know that for myself, but that's in the suttas, and I have faith that that is the case. It makes me feel happy to think about that anyway. And so we are part of something very special and very, yeah, very good. So when we think about things like this, it can really help us in our meditation to come back to, okay, we're a part of something bigger. Breathing in Buddho, breathing out Buddho. We don't need to be thinking all of this all the time, but we take these recollections of the Buddha and store them away. And if we're feeling low or feeling sad, we can think about what the Bodhisattva gave up for our sake and how compassionate that was, how amazing that was. This can also help give us courage. In Thai, we say det dio. It can help us be det dio. It can help us be brave, courageous, because it does take courage to give things up. It takes courage to practice and have a sense of renunciation, of being able to give things up. We want to give, if there's bad things in our life, we want to be able to give them up. That's what we call renunciation or restraint. We call in Pali Sangwara Sila. In Thai, I believe it's Sin Sangwon. So we have that quality that allows us to let go of things, allows us to give things up. But if we don't have saddha, we won't be able to do it. If we don't have saddha, saddha can also, in some places, it can be translated as courage as well. And so if things are not progressing quickly, or the mind is not settling down, it's taking a long time, yeah, we can remember these things and remember that, okay, just keep going forward, keep moving. That's what's important. Keep going, not giving up. Because we might feel like we've failed. We might, how would you say that in Thai? อาจจะมีความรู้สึกว่าตกเสียหรือผิดพลาดไปเรื่อยๆ but if we have saddha ไม่ได้ตกเสียไม่ได้ตก we didn't fail. We only really fail if we stop practicing. So if we keep practicing, doesn't matter. We keep the precepts, doesn't matter. We keep getting back up, and then we will keep making progress. We'll keep moving forward. So these are some reflections from a somewhat heated, foggy mind this evening. And we'll see everybody in the morning time. I'll leave it there.